share with you tonight a love story. And this is a love story about a surgeon and a ballerina. And it started with Al. Al was a student at Notre Dame University, and he was taking his date to the ballet. And while they're sitting there watching the performance, suddenly one of the dancers is gliding across the stage. And as she lifts up her leg and does one of her kicks, her slipper comes flying off her foot. She doesn't miss a beat, but she has to regain her balance, so she turns around and she glides across the stage the other way and purposefully kicks off the other slipper. And in that moment, Al vows that he has to meet the woman, the ballerina, who dances with no slippers. And so he does, and it's the beginning of a 5-year courtship. They go on to graduate, Al as a physician, and Shannon as a ballerina. They get married. Al's a pretty happy guy, as you can see. And they start a family. This is me with the little pixie over here in the middle. And Al and Shannon, these are my parents, my mom and dad. And we continue to expand the family into a small army, which is continuing to grow today. It's a happy family. So Mom, as you can imagine, is the master of ceremonies, mother of all things. We have, besides the children in the house, and every kind of animal, every kind of creature, reptiles, God knows what all ran through our house at one point or another. She made sure we were fed, that we were clean, that we were educated. She drove us to 1,000 different activities. And she prayed a lot. And where we thought she was praying for all of us, I think she was probably praying more for her own sanity. Dad was a busy surgeon. He was our provider. And, we didn't get a lot of time with Dad because he was so busy. But when we did, it was always family time, incredible family time. And it was often excursions to the bowling alley or to the zoo, pretty much wherever you could take a slew of kids and minimize your chances of getting embarrassed because of any unforeseen behaviors, which I'm sure any parent can relate to. Dad was also a man who loved to work with his hands, and he loved to work in the woods, and he and Mom created a beautiful home for us. This was on 30 acres of woods. He maintained trails through the woods. They planted an orchard of trees, every kind of fruit tree you can imagine, a grape vineyard, a garden that was at one point the size of an acre that my mom managed. But basically, Mom canned and froze all the food that fed the masses. It was our family home, and it was really our nirvana. So you can imagine Mom and Dad need a break once in a while. So every fall, they would escape, and they would go to a cabin up north and celebrate their anniversary. And one year, we realized that it was getting a little bit more difficult for that to happen. Mom was having a tough time planning and organizing that trip. So we all kind of swooped in and saw them on their way, helped them out, and got them on their way. But over time, we realized that this was not just an incident in this one time. The trips to Minocqua eventually had to cease because Mom couldn't handle it anymore. It was too difficult for her. And she lost her ability to plan and to organize and to coordinate. While this was going on, we had Mom evaluated. And what she had was she was diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment. This is a precursor to Alzheimer's and dementia. She was later diagnosed with Alzheimer's. This was a really tough transitional period for our family because kind of gone were the visions of what their retirement was going to look like. And they really had to start to plan for that next phase of their lives in a very different way. And my dad rolled up his sleeves like he does everything and jumped right in. And I remember him making a phone call to all of us and asking us to gather around the kitchen table to help him plan their funeral. Pretty morbid, understand nobody's dying yet. Mom was just recently diagnosed, and it was it was sort of one of those, do I really want to show up at this family gathering? And so I ended up going, got there a little bit late. They'd gotten through the readings and what the songs were going to be. My siblings were bantering about who was going to get the extra plots around mom and dad, because there were a couple of extras. And they were all kind of joking off and joking around, and it was a little playful. And then my dad looks up and he says, okay, so let's start to talk about the casket. Do not bury me in a metal box. No glitzy metal boxes. You go out into my woods and you cut down a tree and you make me a wooden box, and that's what I want to be buried in. And we all laughed. But then my younger brother chimed in and he said, but Dad, you can't be in a wooden box by yourself, because you and Mom are going to have to go together. You're always together. And so introduced the concept of the double wide casket. This led to one of the more difficult transitions in this time frame, which was a little later on having to move my parents to an assisted living facility. Going from this incredible nirvana that they lived in and that they had created, and moving into what felt like a little box. Leaving the family home was very difficult, because it also was the gathering place of that small army that you saw, and so many traditions that were built up alongside that. Even harder than that was the difficulty for my father, who this is all a transformation for him as well, as her caregiver. He had to leave. He was leaving with Mom. They were going into assisted living together, but he had to give up one of his greatest passions, which was working the land. And suddenly we saw his world starting to shrink a little bit. That was very difficult for our family. Dad had to evolve, and he, the former surgeon became the woodsman. Then, now he's transforming into the homemaker and the caregiver. But nobody gives you any instructions on how to be a caregiver for a patient who's going through Alzheimer's disease or any chronic disease. Where do you turn? Where do you go? How do you know what it is you're supposed to be doing? So it was a real transformation for my father. And again, narrowing his world dramatically from what it had been before. For me, as an individual and a sibling, my one of 9 siblings, it was a really heartbreaking time for me too, in a period where I personally became very sad and very angry that this was happening to my mother and to my father. And I think where it really struck me over time was when, it may sound silly, but as I went to pick up the phone and call my mom and ask her to help me with a recipe, I have this recipe, it's calling for cream of tartar. I don't have cream of tartar, what do I replace it with? She's not there. I have 4 children, and as my teenagers would have issues, I couldn't call my mom. Suddenly I'm a daughter with no mother, and I felt as though I was beginning to mourn the loss of my mother, and yet she's sitting right there. The role started to turn, and so it became, what's the role that I now play to help care for Mom? So one day I was on my way out to visit Mom and Dad. My dad calls me up as I'm on my way, and he says, Mom's having some trouble making it to the bathroom. And I don't know what to do. I don't know what to buy. Can you help me out? This is one of the few times my dad actually reached out, which wasn't easy for him to ask for help. So I'm standing there thinking, sure, Dad, sure, I can do it. I can figure this out. I didn't want him to have the stress. I stop at the store, and I find a product, and I'm making my way out there. And I bust through the door, because as I'm driving out there, I'm thinking, how do I introduce adult diapers to mom, allow her to retain her dignity, help dad out, solve this problem. So I bust into the room and I pretend it's like Christmas. And I start pulling out these Depends. Lo and behold, they have a trial pack. So this was my big discovery for dad as I went to the store. And I throw the large to dad and I say, okay, let's see, there's an S and an M. And my mother looks up and throws up her hand. Oh, yes, it must be for me. It's for Shannon. So we all got a good laugh out of it. But it also, and we all held them up and you know, got to show, mom got to show that she had, you know, her Depends and everybody else was holding them up. But it was a way to get through a very difficult moment, retaining her dignity and making it a laughable moment, a humorous moment, to get through yet another hurdle. And as I alluded to some of the previous stories, the power of humor through this process and through this journey was so important to my family, and not an easy thing in the early stages, but something you had to begin to adapt in order to be able to manage through all the different crises. So in July of 2013, last year, my mother suffered a stroke. Excuse me. And when I got the call, and I drove out to be with my father, the ambulance hadn't left the assisted living facility yet. And I came around the window. My dad was sitting in the front of the ambulance, and I said, hey, Dad, where's Mom? And he was so distraught. I've never seen him like that. And he described what was going on, but what killed me was when he's shaking, and he said, I should never have called for help. She just fell. I could have picked her up. I could have done this. I should never have called for help because now I've lost all control. I think what people don't understand is when you're dealing with chronic diseases, you often don't have control. But what you need is reinforcement that you have a sense of control. And this is what he felt. He was completely lost. My father and mother, this was another big turning point because now Mom, who couldn't recuperate from her stroke, is in full-time nursing care. She now is not incapable of really doing anything for herself, and so they put her in this little box, and my dad now is in a different apartment. And this is the first time in 65 years that my parents have been apart. My dad wakes up every morning, and he's in her room as they're waking her up, to get her dressed, to feed her lunch, to feed her breakfast and her lunch. He's there until 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon when one of us, we're on a schedule, show up and relieve him so that we can help Mom have dinner, sit with Mom, and get her tucked into bed. Our family is immensely blessed because we are a large family. We are a small army. And we have the opportunity to be with Mom and Dad and support them the way that we do. A lot of families don't have that. In fact, I think most families don't have that. And being able to do that is an opportunity that I think we need to seek for others as well. When I sit with my mother in the evenings, I always hold on to her hand gently. And I feel the pressure that she puts, and she brings her other hand. It's about the only thing she can do is to hold my hand with both hands and squeeze it. But I know when she's squeezing my hand that she knows that I'm there. And when I turn on the music for my mother as we sit together, and she begins to tap her toe, and she begins to take my hand and move it to the rhythm of the music, I know that she knows not only that I'm there, but I know that she's still in there. The dancer is still alive. Despite the fact that there's little left of her memory, my siblings and I persist to be with Mom and to support Dad. So I'm curious to know, of all of you here, who here has been a character in a story like this? Raise your hands. Who here has been a caregiver of a loved one with a chronic disease or any major ailment? Who here anticipates the need for a caregiver at some point in your life? Raise them high. Let's see. Who here hasn't raised your hand yet? Raise it now. So Rosalind Carter, who started the Institute for Caregiving, has a quote, and it says this: "There are only 4 kinds of people in the world: those who have been caregivers, those who are caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers." In the United States today, there are 65 million people, 65 million caregivers caring for family, loved ones with a chronic disease. Perhaps more staggering than that is if you think about the aging population and some of the prevalence of these chronic diseases that are facing us. 10,000 people every day are turning 65 in the United States today. That rate will continue for upwards of 20, 25 years. 10,000 people a day are turning 65. And that rate will continue daily for upwards of 20, 25 years. That is staggering. Today there are certainly services that people can access, but there are no coordinated, integrated services to support family caregivers. We had a unique situation because we have a family that can support, but we as the family have questions that were very difficult to find the answers to. And if you think about the stories that I told, you know, it's not just about the physical care of Mom. It's about your whole life planning. There's legal and social and financial, spiritual issues. Where do you go? Who do you trust? There's no network. There's no channel. And I believe that there is a serious, serious crisis if we can't figure out how to resolve that. How do we form the partnerships, public and private, that can come together and create a model to solve this challenge so that families, even mine, with the Army we had, you know, we struggled to get some of the answers that we needed. It's a challenge we all need to be a part of solving as a community, as individuals. I feel very blessed that my father can still sit with my mother today and read their memoirs of the love and the life they've shared together. Because to my dad, he still sees the image of the dancer on the stage. And that's unique, and that's special. I only hope that we all are blessed in the same way.